Welcome back to the Kingsway Podcast.
Welcome.
We're almost out of summer, Ryan.
I know.
This may be the hottest or the last hot day of this year.
I'm hoping so.
That's wild. And it's 97 right now with like 80% humidity.
Yeah. It's we are on broil.
That is broil boil because it poured rain.
A good crust.
It rained for a good 10 minutes to make sure the humidity stayed extra high. It was like you're frying an egg and the top's a little jiggly, so you throw a little water in there and then stick the pot over it.
We went from broil to steam.
Well, we just finished a series on family values, and it's always fun when I feel like there's a chance to maybe reflect and then also talk a little bit more about why this series came about. And then also the end of the series had a very specific idea around it that I thought it'd be fun to talk about our experiences with that part, which was memories. And we'll get to that in just a moment. This series as a whole, I know I had COVID in the middle of it, and so we've already done one of the sermons on here on patience. We just talked about family values being something that is more than just what you learned in kindergarten as an obligation to be a good person, as now being something that we're recognizing if we do these things like sharing and being patient, being loyal, and taking time to create memories around our values to leave a legacy of love, point to a kingdom. And that they're actually an opportunity to reveal that.
These are really values, not just of like what it means to be a picture-perfect family that has the best Christmas card and the best Christmas traditions, whatever. But this is like what it takes to be a good family, period. What it takes to be a good family as we are one family in the body of Christ.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so this last Sunday we did memories, and I mentioned on Sunday that I got viciously attacked by a box of old photographs of my children right before I had to preach. It was like Saturday night at like 7:30, and I'm like trying to put this whole thing together. And to sum up the idea, he's not going to make me do like the whole 90-second breakdown, thank goodness. But the concept around this was I started to realize that your memories are really just you keeping track of the things that you think are most important. And so your memories end up being a reflection of your values, of what you think is most important in your life. And over the course of time, as you record those things in your mind or in pictures or whatever, they really start to reflect your complete legacy. And so turning that around and talking about if God and your faith journey, if it had memories that you could attach to and that would reveal what its value has had in your life, what would those be, and are they on display?
Yeah, I've heard other people say just about things like this in general, that every machine, every political system, every education system is perfectly designed to produce the products it's producing.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to say about families is like, okay, so you work some extra hours at the end of the week. If you're like a immediate family, parents and kids and whatever, you work extra hours at on every Friday, and so that you can save up money to go on a big family vacation. But what you're doing, maybe you're really saving up for an awesome vacation that your family's going to love and cherish, but also maybe you're stealing time away from your family and you're instilling that there's this value on special experiences rather than common experiences. Yeah. I love you the most at special times, but not just all the time.
Yeah.
I would sacrifice you for other things most of the time.
And I think that's what I end up challenging people to think about is what memories right now do they cherish? And obviously I brought a couple of the pictures that caught me off guard late at night on a Saturday, pictures of my kids when they were much younger, 10 years younger. And now that, that stage is kind of over, even pictures of my wedding and pictures, just things that are a time gone by that I cherish. And at the end of the sermon, and this is basically the bulk of what I think we want to talk about, and it's not going to be a super long podcast today. It may be a little longer, but I challenge people to say, like, if somebody sat you down and they asked you, and, we have this saying in the Western and American culture, it's like, my life flashed before my eyes, what would your faith story look like if it flashed before your eyes?
Or even, would your story look like faith?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And
you've talked about the same idea at other times. It's like at your funeral, what people share about you is the stuff that lasts at least to another generation or to whatever. That's the impact you had on people. And it's very rarely he had this much money unless you spent time with that money, sharing it with people, buying meals and hosting people and buying entire vacations for you and family members or friends to take or whatever. People
Unless
might
that
remember
money
that.
turned into a display of love.
Yeah. Then nobody's going to remember and nobody's going to care.
Yep.
But yeah, what somebody says at a funeral about you is like deeply important. And so
it is, because I think Andy Stanley, the ones that mentions this, but I know he's not the only one. But the only things that are talked about at funerals is who you loved and who loved them, who they loved and who loved them. So like that's all that's going to be talked about is who they poured their life into and who chose to invest in them with love.
Yeah.
And so here's the question at the end of the sermon is if you sat down with somebody and you had to talk about a memory that would be a good indicator of your current faith position or journey, or was a turning point, or is a catalyst, or is a flagship of like a current part of your life, or even the foundation of your faith, like what do those memories look like? And I went through a few of them in the New Testament when Jesus interacted with people, how it became, and Zacchaeus was the one that ended up pulling it up, where like I just pictured this guy that had this wild life change and even economic change, social change, a reformation of personality and priority, and how, I don't know if it was 2 weeks or 10 years or 5 months, whatever it was, but how many times you would have had to tell that story because people would have been like, well, weren't you a tax collector? And he's like, yeah. And I met Jesus and everything changed. And they're like, really? What happened? What was that like? I feel like to a degree, we all should have or should be aware that those types of moments are still happening. Maybe we're not in a sycamore tree and we don't have to climb down. And maybe Jesus doesn't physically come into our house and have a meal with us. And maybe we don't give away half of our possessions in one moment. But something changes in a dramatic way and we're aware of it.
Yeah. I'd say some of those memories for me are like, this is a very general memory, but I remember growing up at my church, and there of 120, 140 people, there were maybe a small handful of people who looked like me, like my same age, my same interests, my same like personality and whatever. But the vast majority of my church was like old people.
Yeah.
I don't know how to say it any nicer in case any of you are listening.
Not
but
the
it was
same
like,
generation.
Yeah, it was like my parents, and they had a lot of friends, and I had some friends, a handful, a very small handful. But I remember one of the first moments that I felt like I really belonged at church. Like church was not a place that my family took me, but a place that I should be, like not just in a legalistic way, was when I joined the worship team. And that's one reason why I have the job that I have right now.
Yeah.
Is it was so powerful for me to join that team of people leading music, leading worship every Sunday.
Did you play the tambourine the first time?
No. Here's what happened. We have one worship team. It's the same team every week. If somebody's missing, there's no one to replace them.
Don't play that instrument.
So our drummer for our church graduated from high school and was going to college at Missouri State, which is very close to here.
Yes, it is.
So they're like, who's next? That's pretty much it. So
like, this kid over here knows how to play
for the next 7 years.
The desk drawers. Did you have any experience playing the drums?
A tiny bit. I had like percussion in middle school, 6th grade, maybe a little bit more. We had a drum kit at our house, but I like just kind of messed around and could hold a groove a little bit.
So you just came in there and just played the steering wheel drum set for a while.
I played the full drum set.
Yes, but it was like it was your steering wheel.
But so like I was filling a need, like, hey, we need a drummer. And then they heard me and they were like, we don't need him that bad. But the thing that was so impressed on me was that like, it was the first time in my life that I had a purpose. It's like going to school. It's not like, man, we need you to take this test for our benefit. It's like you take a test and we'll see if we like you after, or how good you are because of this test. But that was like the first time somebody needed me, and I felt really valuable because of that. And then on top of that, it was the first time that like people wanted me. It was like it was that worship team became like a little church small group for me. And maybe a lot of the other people wouldn't remember it the same way because they had lives and jobs.
That's
and
not how
whatever.
these events, you know what I mean?
But yeah, for me, it was like deeply important. And it became a place where I belonged, not because I'm related to those people, not because, sort of because I had a skill that they needed, but like I wasn't that great at that skill.
Well, and I think that's some of these core memories we'll talk about. I think it's the same way. And sometimes it is belonging.
Yeah.
It is having someone believe in you.
Yeah.
It is a change in behavior, oftentimes, like how you act. I know specifically I had a friend in high school. His name was Chris, and his family, his dad was military, did not grow in the Christian church, at church of any kind. And I remember going to their house, and the term "cuss like a sailor," I understood it because his dad was,
he was
from the
closer
Navy.
to a sailor than you were.
Yeah, and I remember that he would like cuss back and forth with his parents, and like they just had relationship with each other that I'd never seen before. And then Chris started coming to church with me, and ended up getting baptized. And I didn't baptize him. You know, it was totally like listen to the sermons, listen to the small groups, maybe influence around me, saw my family, wanted something different, got baptized, and he never cussed again. And what was so funny about it wasn't necessarily because someone told him. It was because he wanted his parents to see the difference in him and to know something. So he was famous. Man, he'll never listen to this, but if he ever does, he will laugh. He was famous for having the stupidest things that he would say when he would get frustrated. Like he would just be like flip flap 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 flap. Like he would just like, and I knew what he was doing was he was just like, I'm not gonna say, and he would just get silly and say the silliest stuff. And I remember asking about it, like probably 6 months to a year after he got baptized, where I was like, dude, like you just seem like a completely different person. And he said, I didn't get baptized because I was hoping I would change. I got baptized because I saw God changing me and I met him and I wanted to follow. And I remember as like a kid that grew up in the Christian church, I got baptized because I was like, well, I guess I've been doing this for long enough. So probably should get wet. You know what I mean? Like probably should go get dunked. And not that it wasn't true or a conviction, but it just didn't have the same polarizing effect from one day or one moment to the next in my life. And I remember just thinking about like, wow, I hope someday I have some sort of an experience like that. And it really was cool. And I'm sure some people that are listening right now, they may have their thing. I'd love to see a comment of it or have somebody email us with their story if they have one that they feel like is super powerful. I think, you know, for me, I have multiples along my journey that have kind of reinforced things. And, you know, I used to think it was going to be like a parting of the sky and like a ray would come down or like there'd be like a hand that would write on the wall or, you know, some sort of, and now I realize most of the time it's such a quiet, soft thing in a place of just openness and sometimes desperation or loss or hurt that I feel it the most, where I feel like God meets me there. You know, we don't have any evidence that Zacchaeus was distraught or that things weren't going well for him. But it appears there was something not right.
And it could be, this is full speculation. This is not necessarily in the Bible. But it could be sort of like Jim Carrey's story.
Yeah.
I feel like we've talked
Got
about before.
everything.
Yeah, he could tell it better than us, but we don't know him. So we can't have him tell you. But Jim Carrey, the actor, was like, had been in a ton of big movies and was very famous and very wealthy because of these movies. And he got to that height of fame and wealth and was like, there's nothing here.
Yep.
It's not better.
Yeah.
It's so empty.
He had that quote where he's like, I wish everybody could get whatever they think they need to realize it's not.
And whatever they think they want.
Yeah, to realize it's just not enough.
Yeah.
It's not going to be enough. And I think that's kind of the opposite of what I think faith things become. It's you didn't even know you needed it, or you weren't even looking for it, and then all of a sudden it shows up. For me, you remember the artist Sean McDonald? Do you ever remember taking my hand to the promised land and on you? Whoa, what I think I cannot do it on my own.
I was thinking of
Shawn Mendes.
No, a different McDonald.
Oh, different McDonald. Josh McDonald is
maybe it wasn't a McDonald, but it's from the 80s, 90s.
So Sean McDonald was an artist that moved to Seattle to try to become a musician and failed, and was living on the streets of Seattle, and was I think in a homeless shelter, and found Jesus and dedicated his music to his faith. And his first Christian album blew up in the mid to late 90s. It was self-titled, Sean McDonald. And it has 2 or 3 really good hits on it. But one of the songs on there, I owned the album, and I had failed out of community college, and I was sitting at a park that had been built on a landfill. So much so that it had warnings that you weren't allowed to smoke there because you could blow yourself up because the methane was coming up through the ground. And I always found that was hilarious from like, somebody didn't read those signs. You just catch on fire. But it was late at night, and I was kind of lost to what to do next. And I had an inkling to go into ministry, but my lifestyle at the time was so far from what I felt like God could use. And the song was called Empty Me. And it was like the chorus just goes, I can't do this on my own. I can't do this on my own. Empty me. I can't do this on my own. Come and rescue me. I can't do this on my own, but I hope you'll use me. And I just it like hit me as like I joined in the prayer and of what I felt like the song was, and the just the heart of it felt so true to myself. And so as that song ended, I remember just crying out to God going, you know who I am, you know how broken I am, you know how my struggles, you know my heartaches, you know my wounds, you know my scars. You know I can't read and write very well. I've already failed college, but whatever I have, I'll give, and I'll just trust that you'll fill me up. And it's clear as day. He was just like, that's all I needed. And I was like, okay. And went to Ozark Christian College, never failed a class again, married my wife, and I've been at this church at the end of that tenure of school. I've been out for 15 years. And I think back to that often where the cry of my heart has not changed, where it's like, I still have weaknesses and brokenness and heartache and moments of feeling like inadequacy climbs in, but that's a staple of like, that's how I was called in the first place. So why would it ever be any different? You know, and so it is kind of like you didn't start this journey because you felt perfect. You started this journey because you were called. So
I have a similar story. Now I was younger when that happened, but like, it was about the time that I joined my church worship team, maybe a little before or after, but it was the summer after 7th grade, before 8th grade. I went to junior high church camp. And I had already been baptized. I was a regular in our church youth group and whatever. But my family is all engineers as far back as you can go. Dad's an engineer, uncle, grandpa worked on the Apache helicopter and rockets.
Yep.
And then his dad, I'm pretty sure, welded guns onto battleships for World War I and II. So like the manliest, mechanically minded genius,
Lieutenant Dan. You're Lieutenant Dan.
So that was like the trajectory that our whole family has gone in. And so I was just like, I'm good at math and science. That makes sense. Probably going to do that. And following in the same fear and priority that I had heard and was expressed to me, like, I want to make sure I have enough money to live on and enough whatever, like all this. And I was at that junior high camp in 7th grade, after 7th grade, and there were response times near the end of the services, and kids would come down and like confess their sin and talk about how they need Jesus and whatever. And I had an out of body experience with God in one of those services to the song Jesus Paid It All, where I was experiencing it, but watching other kids and adult sponsors, youth leaders who were there being impacted, their relationship with God being active and impacted by this moment, and hearing God say, this is the most important thing you could do with your life, not engineering.
Yeah.
Maybe not specifically not engineering, but like this
is
thing.
it.
And that doesn't mean, hey, you need to get a paycheck from a church to do this, or you need to have a title on a website, but like focus on this thing.
Yeah.
No time limit, no whatever. And that started to change my mind on it. But at the time, my list of skills to be able to do that thing are badly play the drums, and that is the end of the list. And so I wrestled with that a little bit over the next like 5 or so years, but like that was always in the back of my mind. And I served faithfully on my church worship team every Sunday, every Wednesday till I graduated, and then went to Ozark for worship ministry as a worship ministry major. And I picked up the guitar after a while, but from the end of 7th grade till my last semester of my senior year, I did not sing, and I could not sing, and I did not think I could ever sing, and I did not think I was good enough to do that. And so it wasn't like, hey, you have all the skills. I found a good candidate. I'm going to elect Ryan as some worship leader or whatever. Specifically, I got to Ozark and I met Sharon, my wife, who's an incredible piano player, incredible vocalist. And I was like, I get it. I'm supposed to be involved around this, and I'm supposed to help her do this thing. And I'll work at Starbucks or whatever, and I will be the best volunteer sound guy and drummer and whatever I can be. And she's going to lead worship, and I'll just help. And then we graduated college. I did my internships at the end of college and had to lead a couple services. And I don't know if I blacked out for them or whatever. I barely remember them. But then got a job immediately at a 1,200 person church and just started figuring it out. And that's not a great place to start figuring it out.
No. But
the thing that was so cool to me was that like God was faithful to the call he had at first. And he has all the resources and all the power. And it's like Job 38, 39, whatever, at the end of Job, where he's like, where were you when I made... But so God says to Job, who's questioning him, where were you when I set the heavens on a whatever and measured the mountains in the palm of my hand or on a scale or whatever. But also, I'm pretty sure in that same section he says, I'm actually thinking of Moses at the burning bush. I have a stutter.
Exodus,
Yeah, in Exodus. I have a stutter, God. I don't think you can use me. And he says, who made your mouth? Who made your voice? And that's fully what happened. I'm not saying my singing ability is a gift from God. It's the best you've ever heard. But I'm saying I didn't have it.
Well,
I had none.
And
God helped me.
And that's to be frank. I'd only taught kids. I'd never taught an adult.
Yeah.
I'd never preached. I'd never written a sermon. I'd led 3rd and 4th grade camp, and I'd done a few children's ministry things. But I had no. There was nothing behind. I mean, I was thinking I'll probably just travel and talk for a living. Like that'll probably be all I'll be able to do, and it'll probably be with kids forever because I don't know how much I'm going to ever be able to know. And the wild thing about these types of memories is like as I walk through them in my head and like the ways that God has confirmed over and over again, and praying for each of my kids when they're born and watching other people come to faith. One of the things in the back of my mind that I have list just God has confirmed over and over and displays his goodness over and over is like watching people discover what it's like to be used by God, watching people discover what it's like for God to step into their life in a way they didn't expect, watching people discover a relationship God to be more than they imagined, better than they thought. And then watching God comfort and be a helper and a motivator and a counselor through the Holy Spirit in a way that it's like you're a willing instrument, but you are not the power inside. It's like you're like, I'm a part of this, but I have no idea how this is happening. you're like, I'm a light bulb, but I don't know how I glow. I don't have the power by myself, that type of stuff. And I just believe that there's more stories in our church that could be talked about or told, or even those that are listening that aren't a part of our local church. I feel like sometimes if someone asks you, like, why do you go to church, or like, why Jesus, or why your faith, or why does this matter so much to you? Not that quoting a Bible verse is bad, or talking about a Bible story is bad, but having those real encounters, those real memories, those moments that have formed your legacy, that have created why you are who you are and where you are, where you're at.
If you want a Bible verse for not quoting Bible verses but telling your own story, which is a funny thing to say, just look at the book of Acts. Paul has this whole conversion experience, Saul to Paul. And then he tells it 3 times.
Yep.
You read the same account, maybe not word for word because he's saying it every time, so it's just the details that are hitting him. Almost word for word, 3 separate times between like chapter 22 and 28-ish. And he's just telling his story. And that's the thing I would encourage you with if you're listening. Yep. Maybe you do have, I hate even describing this, but it's so real. People in church circles, they love seeing God work and move and make big moves. And so they'll see some deep drug addict be life changed into the Lord. And they're like, that's a good story. My story of growing up in a Christian home and just quietly, mildly wrestling with my faith myself, or what faith looks like in the real world, is not a good story.
It's not worth it. And you're like,
that's wrong.
That's
incorrect. Not evil, but that's like fully incorrect.
It's marginalizing what God has done in your life.
So, for instance, for me, I remember I had a time when I was about 16 and I was at home and I was in my room and I was just suffering and struggling with depression and loneliness and not feeling like I belong anywhere, and feeling like, honestly, some of the most depressing thoughts that can lead certain people to suicide and stuff like that. Thoughts that were like, if I was gone, nobody would miss me.
Yep.
And that's exactly the moment. I had a bunch of those moments, but this was like one of the worst. That's the moment that I felt God ask me to read Psalm 23. And I was so moved by it. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. That I memorized the whole, it's only 6 verses, but the whole thing. And that's been a thing that the Lord has been able to draw out of my heart and remind me of some truth in our relationship and how he cares about me and how much I matter to the Lord, just like everybody matters to the Lord. When I'm really doubting that, that was a moment that I'll never forget. I can see the cover of that NLT digital camo Bible.
Yeah.
And like I can see where it is on the page and I can smell the dusty carpet in that room and I can like, that was a moment I'll never forget with the Lord. But if in that moment I couldn't have told you specifically like he told me this, I just felt like the mild nudge to like, hey, you should look at this.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. It's those catalyst moments like that. Mine's Ezekiel 36, 26, and 27. Take the heart of stone, replace it with the heart of flesh, teach you. Like, I remember reading that and going, okay, you can take the thing that I feel like I can't change out, this hard thing, and you can give me something that can, do the work.
Yeah.
But it's also the 1,000 little conversations I had beginning after that with people in college, and then the conversations that I got in the ministry and the opportunities that God showed up for me time and time again. And it confirmed the things that he was speaking in the quiet places, but it also confirmed the larger things that he had said from the beginning. Well, I hope as you've listened to this that you've started to formulate maybe a possible thing. And if you haven't had that moment where God is, I'd start to ask you to meet with God in a consistent way and to pray and to say, God, show me your glory, show me your way, figure out where God is, and make an active, consistent, disciplined approach, whether that's through meditation or prayer or journaling or music and worship. But invite God in to speak and then quiet your heart to listen and remove distractions. Put yourself in a place to need him. Serve actively, give generously, and listen and follow through to what he says. So,
Yeah.
as always, this is awesome and a great conversation. I hope this series values was encouraging to you as it was to me, challenging to remind yourself that the legacy you're leaving are the memories you're acquiring, and the memories you're acquiring are displaying the values of either this world or the kingdom. And truly, that is what the kingdom is supposed to be about. It is gathering all of us, like Ryan said, together, celebrating as one the things of God.
Yeah.
So leave a comment, subscribe.
Tell us your story in the comments.
I'd love
Or
that.
if you don't feel like it's for the whole world, that's okay too. You can email us.
Yeah.
Ryan at kingswaymo.com.
Find us at church. Tell us about it. Always leave a review if you feel like this is helpful. It helps the algorithm, helps other people find us, and hopefully it continues to be encouragement to those that listen. So, as always, have a great and glorious day in the Lord. We'll see you next time.
See ya.